Alright guys, note to self, never film at 4 p.m. any day because the sun will just glint on your glasses weird and the lighting will be really weird. I've been trying to perfect the angle for quite some time now. I'm so sorry. I promise I'll get better at this over time. Anyways, so for today, I'm starting a new video series called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Blank. And there's going to be 16 videos and they'll all highlight the 7 habits that each type should incorporate when integrating. So I took a page from Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I thought to myself that really though, there's 16 different ways that people can become highly effective. We don't all have the same route to integration, and these are tips and tricks that I came up with based on my knowledge of the cognitive functions that dictate the personality types, and I really wanted to bring them in a video format to anyone who believes they are this type and see if it resonates. So for today, I want to start with the INTP. If you are an INTP, you are probably someone who is really skeptical, but I find this type, they can be very self-aware and very willing to actually change up how they live their lives and how they contemplate humanity. So hope you enjoy what I have for you. So my very first tip is to index your vulnerabilities and hypothesize about what gets you upset. So a big tenet for the INTPs is that they don't keep track of their emotions like some types do. They're much better at tracking their logical conclusions and thoughts. If you find yourself feeling upset about something and you have no idea why, if you constantly index your vulnerabilities, your weak spots, your Achilles heels, then you won't feel so caught off guard anymore. So this means constantly journaling about things in your past that triggered you and analyzing what about it was subjective to your vulnerabilities and your potential triggers. And if you can make an extensive list so you can be emotionally prepared when you're upset to diagnose why it happened, it'll feel much more peaceful for your internal state to not have to constantly figure out a solution to feel better when you don't even know why you feel bad in the first place. Lots of INTPs do get stuck in not being able to empathize with other people when they're feeling vulnerable and overly sensitive, as you may say. But unless you can recognize your own vulnerabilities and your own sensitivities by regularly logging them and thinking about them, it's going to be harder for you to understand why other people are so emotionally reactive. Recognizing that you too are also on some level emotionally reactive may help you not make any biased decisions in how you fix anytime you do feel emotional. And you may in fact find yourself realizing that you're much more emotional than you thought, but it does not have to mean you're out of control or going to fly off the handle or going to make the wrong conclusion. If anything, incorporating emotions into your everyday life will make it much more enriching and easier to make conclusions that make complete sense with all the details. That's why you should index your vulnerabilities. You can audit your entire life as you've known it, and then you can get really clear on the specific sorts of patterns you're seeing as to why you've been upset. And you can go through your entire life and think it through. There has to be a highlight reel of the top 10 most traumatic moments that happened to you that you can really reflect on. So my second tip for a habit of a highly effective INTP is to remember that humans are not actually as stupid as you think or fear. They're simply prioritizing something else, and there is a rhyme and reason to what's motivating them. Instead of making a blanket statement like humans are motivated by emotions, even their emotions have a rhyme or reason to them. There's a systematic reasoning behind it. When some people prioritize, for example, feeling good over logical, they have a logical reasoning behind why feeling good would motivate them. For example, if you feel good, you are going to have more energy to do things. And so some people go toward that to create momentum. Or if some people are doing things in the name of love, they're realizing that love enhances their optimism about life and maybe also gives them more energy or gives them more an ability to stay in a good mood, which gives them peace of mind. So there's a lot of like perfectly reasonable reasons for why people are doing things that confuse you, but you have to remember that everyone has a priority even if you can't see it, because lazily concluding that people just don't operate on logic if you can't see it is not the solution. Maybe their logic is something that's very different than yours and it's highly subjective to them, but it is something that if you care and are curious to find out, you can ask and find a lot of information that you weren't even aware of about how that person functions. I think this is really essential to building empathy for other people, because when you build empathy and you don't insult someone's intelligence, even internally, people are more cooperative. You will get more done with them when you have to put up with them, whether in the workplace, whether at home, wherever it is. People will get along with you better, and you'll ultimately be able to even use them for your own good and create more effective systems for whatever you're trying to get done. It'll only benefit you to respect people's decision-making process. Rule number 3. The world will not fall apart if you don't correct someone's faulty thinking. So always ask what someone is thinking. Now I know that you feel this moral duty perhaps to let people know when you think they aren't thinking about something correctly. But oftentimes people have a lot more ego invested in not knowing, and while it can be torturous to watch, I think this requires you to be very tactful about making sure that you don't invalidate someone's reality when correcting them. So I think a big part of it is observing how they respond to criticism better and understanding that situationally people will respond to your suggestions better if they're in the correct mood. If you can read the room and understand the pattern of what leads to them being able to be receptive to criticism by analyzing what you've already observed, this will help you to integrate how to actually help people. Now, to bring it back to what I said about how the world won't fall apart, you can only really analyze from a detached place if you are not obsessed with the idea that, like, for you to be useful to society or to do your moral duty, you have to correct people. In time, people do learn their lessons by making mistakes, and that in fact is a way that some people actually learn best. And I know that for you, all you ever do is think very deliberately and intentionally, but you have to understand that some people, that is exhausting for them. They can't do it that way. So it's better off to actually help them ask better questions and to demonstrate without condescending to their knowledge level and informing them on how you think they should do things or asking rhetorical, passive-aggressive questions. Instead, show legitimate curiosity by believing that there is a logic behind what they're doing. So refer back to my other tip. But then read the room on if they're in a place to receive a suggestion. You can even ask, do you want my advice, or are you just trying to vent? Or is it okay if I give you a suggestion? People normally can consent or not, and then you have to respect that. Ultimately, they're going to learn and benefit just from your helpful presence in their lives, but you have to respect other people's livelihoods and ability to think, because you have blind spots too that irritate other people. And you wouldn't like it if you were always being corrected to that degree if it was something that no one was correcting you about correctly. They didn't understand what it would take for you to actually implement the solution. You would find it very unhelpful. I know you're like, oh, I actually like it when people criticize me, but you actually don't. You like it when they criticize you in a way that makes sense to your logic. But if someone told you to just be more empathetic, that wouldn't make sense to you. So you probably find that information distressing and very annoying. So on the flip side, really look for how people actually want to receive feedback and know that there is a rhyme or reason for it, but it's highly subjective to the individual. My next tip is to let yourself really take pride when you do make a useful contribution to your larger community. Now, I know that like some of the previous concepts we just talked about were very based on kind of being cocky, but I do think that actually true humility is based in a type of detached confidence in one's utilities and skills. Therefore, if you let yourself actually take pride in what you're explaining well, or what you're demonstrating well, or how you're actually helping people, it'll give you the confidence to not have to fixate so much on proving your worth in instances where it's unwelcome. So reflecting on the times in which you've been successful at actually facilitating helping a community will actually give you the ability to discern for more success in more contexts where your help is actually welcome and even needed. It's very necessary to learn to read the room as an INTP before volunteering unsolicited help. Over time, it'll become less unsolicited if you're willing to actually take confidence in and therefore focusing on the times in which you actually did make a beneficial decision, and in which someone actually benefited very directly from your advice. We're going to take out the instances in which someone benefited from your advice but was really salty in how they received it, because even though you did end up probably helping them, it wasn't welcome for a reason. And often it's not the other person's responsibility to just be less sensitive. It might have not been administered as tactfully as you intended it. So really analyzing those instances but not letting them actually chip away at your self-esteem is also important. But first you have to balance out thinking about the successes, like the no question about it successes, and really taking confidence in that and really integrating it into your body so there's no question about it. And from there you'll be able to actually then use your own body as intuition for when is my advice welcome and when it's not. I know that some INTPs who are watching this will be like, oh my god, like I don't really give a shit if people want it or not, I know what's better, blah blah blah, like fuck you Crystal, who cares? But what I want to implore to you is that unfortunately you as an INTP, as you mature, will probably have learned that you do need other people insofar that society is made up of many individuals. And no matter how independent you are, people around you still impact you for better or for worse, and you do need to learn how to get along with them. A lot of these skills I'm talking about are very geared towards the fact that this is something that is inescapable. And as an INTP, you probably want to escape it more than anything and hole into your introverted hole and not have to worry about all of this. And I guess if you don't feel that way and you're actually taking this advice well, then cool, dandy. I'm operating off of the assumption that socializing, while it won't necessarily be a pain point for every INTP, navigating your own emotions within all of that and navigating understanding why people react to you in the way they do is something that could be of value. So I'm just saying how I see it from my ENFP perspective. My next tip is humbling yourself to know that you have much to learn from others and looking for creative ways to value them. It's very easy for you as an INTP to completely write off people that you don't think have any contribution to society and to not see the utility in learning new things that you don't think you'll ever use. However, I'd like to volunteer that simply from being curious about everything you don't know, it gives you more context as to what you do know and gives you then more potential connections to enhance the ideas that you already are interested in. So don't think of it as like all these ideas I'm going to learn about, I have to put into action. Think of it more as, one, there's an avenue for connection when people are learning from each other, and it can be a really intense bonding experience. And two, it can actually give me more information to then work with in the future when it comes to like a random thing I once heard about or saw that I can then parallel into a metaphor to explain better my areas of expertise. And at the very least, I think you'll also learn how people work and how their interests work. And that is something that you probably don't see a rhyme or reason to. But because you're not that great at introverted feeling, which is this archive of every single emotion everyone's ever had, you're probably not going to naturally want to pay attention to the subjective interests and values of others. But these are subjective motivations that do propel people forward into realities that you can't fathom. So it is important, I think, to learn from them with the understanding that this information says something about the world that you are being forced to live in. So you might as well take part in it in that way. So asking good questions is a good way to get curious and to get better in the grand scheme of things with your participation in the human experience. Next tip about being a highly effective INTP is to let yourself be nostalgic. At the end of the day, you do have inside of you this introverted sensing, this index of every single moment and instance that's ever happened to you, and you are very influenced by it. You're very influenced by what you've seen works before, dictating what you think is possible in the future. And if you're not careful, you might be held back by that. So if you regularly are scrutinizing the past, even like idealizing some good parts of it, but not idealizing the parts you've grown out of, I think that it can help you double check when you're projecting from the past onto the present. Without the presence of extroverted sensing, which is a function that you do not naturally favor, you don't really know how to live in the moment physically. You don't know how to take things so literally. You're very subjective about it. And it's very subjective based on your experiences of what you've been through and what you've seen before that makes sense to you. So it's important to be nostalgic, because I think if you spend time in that environment and contrast it to where you are now, you'll be able to better be released from the grip of being dictated by your past if you're intentionally going so deep into it that you can distinguish when you're in it versus when you're here in the present. I think that if we're not careful and we're avoiding thinking about the past, we don't really learn from it. We make the same mistakes multiple times. So if you're constantly reflecting on the past and using that as an avenue to do better in, and also, like, this is where indexing your vulnerability and emotions comes in. If you're constantly recalling back to that time, you won't have it throw you off guard. Now, my last tip is to never be too married to your ideas and recreationally look for ways to prove your own ideas are wrong. You don't like it when someone else challenges your ideas, probably, but what if you challenge your own ideas by intentionally seeking out information to contradict them? Because chances are, when you see any information that's contradictory that you yourself sought, you'll be able to, on your own time, integrate it into your conclusion and make an even better conclusion from these qualifications of the other side. Plenty of INTPs very much live in a circle jerk of believing their own bullshit, and they feel immune to literally anyone having any room to comment. And if you can be your own best critic of your ideas and constantly look for ways that they're wrong from a humble perspective of just trying to refine them, you're going to really change some lives. And also, people aren't going to try to pick a fight with you by saying you're wrong, because you've already thought about every single counter argument that they could throw at you. So it's both protecting your emotional investment in your ideas by detaching from it enough to challenge it actively. I think that challenging your own ideas is something that all NPs need to do. They need to find the best critics that they respect, and honestly, those critics are often ourselves. So referring to that can really help you as an INTP. So yeah, if you got to the end of this video and you are an INTP, know that as an ENFP, I'm very intimidated as to whether you guys actually enjoyed or thought this video was good. I'm aware that I don't have great introverted thinking, so I will probably end up making more videos in the future explaining in depth some of these ideas, but I wanted to quickly put them out there because I figured that even me flexing some extroverted thinking at you can be enough for you to then latch onto and think about how this shows up in your life, or maybe you had a new idea, or maybe you think I'm just full of shit and you're gonna down this video or whatever, downvote, whatever that term means. I don't really know, but at the end of the day, I do hope that for everyone who is watching, who got something from this video, that you can use these habits as a way to actively better your life and hopefully maybe even get along better with some of the INTPs that you have to interact with or are your best friends. So yeah, anyways, I hope you guys have a good day and I will talk to you soon.